Hi everyone, and welcome back to CrownCast, the podcast from Crown Bioscience that discusses the emerging trends and viewpoints in oncology drug discovery and development. I'm your host, Johnny McMichael. Today, I'll be continuing my conversation with Alex Slater, Crown's Senior Vice President of Commercial. Thanks for tuning in, and hope you enjoy. From your perspective, Alex, what do you see as this sort of key characteristics of a CRO from a client perspective? What were clients looking for?
I think one of the most important things is ease of communication, right? Good, effective, efficient communication that's clear is really important. That first connection or first interaction that they have with the CRO is so vital. And if they feel that there's an understanding of what they're trying to share with that CRO in terms of their requirements, in terms of their challenges, and they feel that they're getting feedback which is based on experience and expertise, and that they basically can build confidence with that CRO, that's always going to be really important. I mean, quality is a given, right? You have to deliver quality. The other thing that companies are looking for is, and that they will understand that there can be issues, but what they want to see is that there is a rapid and pragmatic way of dealing with those issues. That the CAPA processes are really effective, that that issues are not brushed aside. And that actually can be quite challenging because sometimes clients can be disappointed with results, which can make them feel that there are issues. And I think there, as oftentimes at a CRO, there are times when we need to be clear on setting client expectations. And I think actually, although this is not a requirement necessarily from our clients, I would say it's something that we need to think about. Is setting client expectations, being very clear about the challenges and risks of particular models or particular testing systems, and sharing that information up front, I think is really important. And it forms part of that communications that I mentioned right at the top.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with you. And in many cases, there are human interactions, and humans like to be treated in kind. And I always think a good guideline is, how would you wish to be treated if you were the customer? And that's something we must always bear in mind in everything that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And numbers of times talking with internal teams, reminding them of how it felt when they contact a utility provider or somebody else that's one of their, someone that they're buying something from and they've had a poor experience. Remembering what that feels like and how the person at that company reacted really should help people feel about how we or they need to interact with clients, right? It's never personal. It's never you did something wrong. It's we as a company, yes, we made a mistake. How can we fix that? There's a level of empathy that you have to show and a level of acceptance, and then being able to show what you're doing, show how you're going to rectify the situation and help it not occur again. It's all really very important. But people need to remember, like you say, put themselves in as the client.
And every individual has a responsibility towards that relationship, and their interactions will reflect on an entire organization effectively. I mean, we're getting close to Christmas, and I'm getting a lot of deliveries here, but if the person that delivers my post in the morning is rude, then that reflects on the entire Royal Mail organization. So it's a big responsibility on every individual, and every, as we said it many times, every individual, every team really contributes to the client experience, every single one of us. So we should start to come towards the end of the questions now. I've got a few more I just wanted to run by you, and One of them was competition. We all like to have competition. What do you feel having strong competition does for a CRO and for clients? Um, we obviously know that we in all of our spheres that we work in, we have strong competition, and people have different views on their competitors. Personally speaking, I think competition is essential, and we've got great relationships with our competitors. What do you feel having those strong competitors does?
I think, first of all, for the client, gives them choice, right? When a client has choice, I think that's important. Then when they work with you, they do that because they want to, not because they feel obliged to. And I feel that that's often a better place to be. It often also sets expectations at a slightly different level. Competition is good for the CROs as well. When you have competition, it should force you, if you're a good CRO, to be quite introspective about the offering that you have, the quality of the offering, the extent of the offering, the way that you are delivering to clients. And again, I mentioned that client award that we received, right, to the efforts that you've really been driving for your department. That is really important because clients benefit from competition, not only because I said because of the choice, but also because CROs have to step up. CROs have to differentiate, and differentiation is good for clients. Differentiation is not just about the science, it's not just about the services, it's about how you deliver them, it's about your interactions, it's about your client focus. And I think, you can do that without competition, but competition makes that really necessary. And, I think a good CRO in a competitive landscape will try to impact all of the things that I've mentioned, from the science all the way through to the customer delivery and that client experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. It's a very symbiotic market, and we all work closely together to bring successes for patients, which ultimately is what we're in this for, from the very beginning. So we've talked very expansively around the CRO industry in general. This is just to sort of finish up, focusing more in on oncology. Can I ask sort of what trends in oncology research are you most excited about? And to double that up, what do you consider as the next big thing in oncology research that CROs should prepare themselves for?
Yeah. It's interesting because this question kind of makes me think about a comment that an uncle of mine made 30 odd years ago. So 30 odd years ago, my uncle is a doctor, and we were talking about oncology, and he was saying that really there'd been no new kinds of drugs in oncology 30 years ago, really reliant on these drugs we're using for chemo, right? Which basically highly poisonous drugs that you hoped would kill the cancer before the patient. And, that was really how it was. And when I went into the clinical trial side, I always remember this situation. We were running the first CAR T phase 2 for a sponsor. And there were 90 odd patients on that trial, and more than 90% of those patients survived at the end of the trial. And that was unheard of. And that, at the time, I remember gave me huge goosebumps. And in fact, every time I mention that story, like now, it gives me goosebumps, because all of a sudden it's like, wow, there's something that we can do. There's something new and innovative. And CAR Ts certainly are not the panacea. They didn't solve everything. But, what we've seen since then in terms of all kinds of different modalities antibodies, bispecific antibodies, now antibody drug conjugates, these kinds of things, all different ways of approaching cancers and of different kinds. And I think that is really very exciting, and I think other developments we're seeing in oncology, which actually aren't only in oncology. Liquid biopsies is something we've been talking about for some time. I remember even Covance back in 2014, we're talking about liquid biopsies. But more and more, these minimally invasive methods that allow us to build a prognosis or better understand a particular patient situation will become more and more prevalent, because we just get so much data, so much more information from it without the need of going in and resection or other much more invasive techniques, which for patients who are already suffering enough really can be of a very high burden. So I think that's very exciting. We've talked about personalized medicine for years and years, and all of these new technologies, all of these developments in diagnosis really are taking us towards that. Whether or not we will have specific patient cures, I mean, some of that is already happening today. At scale, it's a challenge, but the industry will meet it some way, shape, or form. But certainly, I think there are huge shifts compared to, when my uncle made that comment 30 years ago. So much has moved on, our understanding of cancer and what it means, how it operates, how it works, how to block it. So, I think it's very exciting at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see so much rapid evolution of modalities and approaches as the following years come on. Yeah, let's say.
And I think in terms of the second part of your question, the next big things, I think what we're seeing, everyone talks about AI right now, right? AI is the thing, no matter which walk of life you're in, AI is there. But I do think it's going to be really exciting and interesting, because in oncology, like a lot of medicine, I think it's going to help us find new targets. It's going to help us find new ways of approaching what seemed to be undruggable targets in the past. It's going to enable us to have insights that we couldn't have imagined or thought about before. So AI will certainly have an impact. Definitely will. I was a little bit skeptical in the past, but I think now we're starting to see that it can absolutely be a tool. It's never going to be the be all and the end all, but it will be a hugely important tool in understanding data. I would say data creation has not been an issue for drug discovery. We can generate more data. The problem is we had so much data, we didn't know how to handle it, we didn't know how to deal with it. And the massive increase in computing power in the past years, the arrival of AI, and then if I look a little bit forwards, the arrival of quantum computing will mean that we can actually deal with these vast quantities of data and pull out information that today we're just incapable of doing. So, I think we're going to see some really interesting shifts. Just AlphaFold being able to very accurately predict the folding of proteins very easily is a huge step. And that's kind of advanced applied across drug discovery and oncology will have huge ramifications.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we will probably cover some of those topics in a bit more detail on future podcasts on our CrownCast. We plan to have conversations with some subject matter experts that touch on a number of the areas that you've talked about there. So let's see how these fields develop, and we're certainly honoured and excited to be at the forefront of all these new developments. So Alex, we've talked for quite some time now. It's been enlightening. Really enjoyed it. Do you have any closing thoughts or comments to share with our listeners before we finish up?
I think really, the thing is for anyone out there, I guess a couple of things. First of all, right at the beginning, we talked about careers. And I think science has a huge opportunity for people in different ways, right? We think about pure science, exactly in the lab, but science can be applied in different ways, in a commercial way, and CROs in general, can be a great place to build a career. So, I would certainly say to people to share their experiences of CRO and drug discovery and pharma and biotech with the younger generation so that they as well can take part in what is really quite an amazing industry. I think drug discovery, drug development, and everything that's in it is really quite exciting. There's a lot of bad press about things about pharma and etc. But really at the core, and this from meeting clients regularly, they want to do good, right? We talk to scientists who are trying to do good, and I think that is huge. And I think it's really exciting when we see some of the advances. So I do feel it's a great career choice and lots of opportunity for people of all kinds of different persuasions of, whether you like talking to people all the time or you don't, or you want to be really scientific and down in the deep science, or you want to sell and interact with different people. There's something for everybody here. So that's really exciting. And I think the other thing is, to clients is CROs are really can be great partners, and having real open conversations about what your challenges are and what you're trying to do can lead to some very different outcomes than maybe we imagine. A lot of CROs, us included, are not that great at sharing straight off the bat all our expertise and depth of expertise within our organizations. And so quite often clients come to us and ask us what we can do based on what they think the provider can do. And that elicits a very narrow response. However, when more of a problematic situation is shared or a challenge is shared, and asking how a CRO could help step up and support that can lead to a very different engagement. And I think then that's worthwhile for the CRO, but it's hugely worthwhile for the farmer as well. Discussions in the past have been able to shorten decision-making across programs by months, just because you have a wider ranging conversation right at the beginning and a true understanding of what's trying to be achieved. So I would say, have wide conversations. And conversely for CROs, salespeople, when you're in front of your client, ask them the big questions, ask them the wide questions. The scientific questions are important, but they're important when you start getting to the detail. But understanding where they've come from and where they want to go is hugely important to be able to set the foundations of a proper conversation and understanding of what they're trying to achieve. And then, of course, how, as a company, you can step up and support that.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are really nice sentiments, Alex. I really like that. And be open, be brave, be creative, be innovative, and have those interesting conversations with each other. So yeah, love it. That's great. Thanks very much, Alex. So I think we've covered a number of areas. It's been pretty wide ranging. It's been enjoyable from my perspective speaking to you, Alex. So thank you very, very much for joining me on CrownCast and sharing your knowledge with our listeners. Look forward to more discussions with you in the future. So, and for all the listeners, thank you very much for joining CrownCast. I really appreciate that. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do hit subscribe on YouTube or Spotify. You will also be able to find us on crownbio.com, and I hope you found it interesting enough that you might wish to join us on a future episode of CrownCast. So Thank you very much and take care all.
Thank you, Johnny.